George Allen Jr. was one of the many wrongfully convicted. He was convicted on capital murder, rape, sodomy, and first-degree burglary in St. Louis, Missouri. He was sentenced to 95 years, but exonerated after 30. A young court reporter, Mary Bell, was found dead in her home by her live-in boyfriend on February 4, 1982. The autopsy showed cause of death was multiple stabs and incised wounds to the victim's back and neck and evidence of sexual assault. The police had initially suspected a known sex offender, Kirk Eden, whose brother lived in the victim's apartment building and who was recently released from jail on rape crimes. On March 14, 1982, police mistakenly approached 26-year-old George Allen, thinking he was Mr. Eden. They brought him in for questioning, and shortly thereafter, Detective Herbert Riley realized the mistake. But they still continued to question him. Eventually, it led to a false confession, which was the primary evidence used. Another testimony was done by the victim's work colleague, Pamela Ann Richardson, which was supposed to pick up some work materials at the victim's house. By the time she had arrived, the perpetrator was already in the home. She stated in the police report that she was uncertain if she called out the victim's name. Investigators used hypnosis to improve her memory, and they focused on that one single fact, which led her to falsely confess on trials that she was certain she had called out the victim's name. The only physical evidence was that some of the semen they found in the victim's body contained A and H antigens, which could not exclude Allen. Allen's first trial was deadlocked at a 10-2 in favor of an acquittal, but in the second trial, despite 3 alibis that Mr. Allen was snowed in at home at the time of the crime, he was convicted on July 25, 1983, and sentenced to prison for 95 years. The case was reopened in 2003, and they had found evidence that excluded George Allen as a suspect that the police had not shown to the prosecution or Allen's defense. He was exonerated 30 years later on January 18, 2013. There were some psychological aspects to the wrongful conviction of George Allen. The first one being false confessions. According to the Innocence Project, 25% of exoneration cases have had a false confession. According to our book, Conviction of the Innocent, internalized false confessions are when an innocent but vulnerable suspects are exposed to highly suggestible interrogation tactics. They confess and also believe that they committed the crime in question, sometimes creating false memories. George Allen was known to have extensive history of severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, and he was coerced into a false confession. On the recordings, you could tell there was coercion and manipulation being used. Allen had informed them he was under the influence of alcohol multiple times, and he was still being detained and questioned. They told him there was evidence against him, and he was asked highly leading questions and gave him prompts to answers that fit the crime. When there was moments that he did not have leading questions, he was giving conflicting facts against the actual known facts of the crime. Another psychological component is problems with forensic evidence. According to the book Convictions of the Innocent, top-down processing depends more on the human processor and less on the data being processed, which results in the processor's state of mind, and the information already known is what actually drives the processes. Which is why the analysts had focused on the A and H antigens found that could not exclude Allen, as well as the 7 fingerprints that were originally said to be of no value because they did not have enough features to compare to other prints. The last psychological component is tunnel vision. According to an article written by Etienne Elad, it is the tendency of actors in the criminal justice system to use shortcuts to filter evidence selectively to build a case for a suspect's conviction, which also leads to confirmation bias in the police work. There was semen found that had B antigens that excluded Allen. There was also fingerprints found that excluded him as well, along with a drawing made by Allen to test the accuracy of his confession of the layout of the crime scene that did not match the actual crime scene. All of this was evidence not revealed by the police, which would have led to the dismissal of the case brought against George Allen Jr. This is just one of the many examples of a wrongful conviction.